Welcome to my first episode of Journals from the Edge. And I just wanted to let you know I am not a technical person, so you will see me have problems with the technical side of things. And I do travel a lot, so I film in all kinds of places, and just because I travel a lot. And there most likely will always be an animal with me. Today I have my grand doggy Bree, who is sitting right here. She's usually in my lap, and I had a kitten in my hand when I filmed my first hello video, introduction video. So today I want to talk about grief and just how it's been a constant companion in my life, and it's demanded so much of me so often that sometimes I can't keep up. My perspective of it comes not from textbooks, although I am currently enrolled in David Kessler's grief certification curriculum, but it comes from experience. I've navigated this mostly by myself as a weight of losing my son, my mom, my best friend, and a lot of other people has driven other people away from me. It feels as if death was contagious. It came all at once. It was brutal, it was swift, and the people around me just fled. They just left. I also felt that grief was punishing me for some reason, and I couldn't figure out why. Well, I've never been a person to live life wrong or do anything wrong, so I couldn't figure out why this was happening to me. And a lot of people around me were leaving because they couldn't handle my grief, so they were afraid too that maybe since I've lost my mom and my son and everybody, they might lose someone they love, so they left me also. So not only did I lose the people that I loved in my life in death, I lost people that are alive and still here. And it's like I watch people, my friends, my family, acquaintances, they just faded from my life like ghosts. They're in the background, but they're no longer truly interacting with me. Their absence to me felt as sharp as the losses themselves. So early on, I realized that this journey was going to be one of isolation, of solitude, one that I would have to try to figure it out on my own. I did get help with a grief counselor. I have been on medication. I have done everything that I could think of to help myself. And I've also tried to surround myself with people who will want to walk alongside me in this pain, and people who help me or just be there for me while I'm in this pain. So the first thing I want to talk about in this episode is who I am. I've included the name of this episode, Just Lisa, to give a brief introduction to the me before I wrote my books and won awards and before the grief hit. And I've always been simply me. And every story has a beginning, so this is my beginning, Just Lisa. So I grew up in a small North Carolina town. I was the fourth of 5 children. My parents' firstborn kids were twins. The second was the only boy, then me, and then my younger sister. We all shared the same unmistakable hair color, freckles across our nose, fair skin. You always knew our family, we belonged together because of the family resemblance. My mama made most of our clothes back then. She was from a self-sufficient farm in Tennessee, as was my father. And when the twin girls outgrew their outfits, my mom would pass them down to my younger sister and I. So whenever we went out, it looked as if we had 2 sets of twins. Often mom and daddy had to clear up the confusion. So they would point to my sisters and they would say, now these are the twins. And then this is our only son. And they'd skip over me and they say, this is the youngest daughter, the youngest child. And then they just look at me and they go, well, this is Just Lisa. So therefore it stuck. So even my birthday set me apart. The twins, of course, had the same birthday in September. The youngest and the only son had birthdays 4 days apart in January. And me, I'm in November, election day to be exact. That's when I was born. So every election day, my parents had to go out and vote. And Mama often, when I was younger, they did celebrate my birthdays, but as time grew on, they would kind of forget about them because they were working full time. They had 5 children. Mom, I remember one time she put a bundt cake in the oven and then never turned it on. So I never grew up with any sense of identity, I guess you could say. I was just always Just Lisa. So I just learned to, hide my feelings about I really didn't feel that bad that they forgot about my birthday and things. I really didn't. But I just learned to wait and just see if anybody would notice if they did. And so for as long as I can remember, I was kind of adrift, like a nameless child. And then I had a lot of illnesses. When I was 5, I was put in the hospital for a few weeks. They thought I had spinal meningitis. And as one child out of 5 with 2 parents that worked, my parents couldn't be with me in the room, and I was in an isolation room all by myself. So at the age of 5, here I am all alone in a hospital, terrified, and no one there with me. The nurses and they tried to stay with me, but they couldn't either. They had other patients to take care of. So it was, in the end, they chalked what was wrong with me up to a combination of childhood illnesses. I can't remember exactly which ones, but I had several. But that pattern of physical pain had already taken root, and as life went on, I did remain sick for years and years. I had stomach issues. Daddy was always rushing me to the emergency room for stomach problems. They tested everything about me, and I just was diagnosed with like an ulcerative stomach. So I think a lot of that illness came from the anxiety I felt of being the way I was in my family. I had a very good family, a good Southern Baptist family. We were raised in the church all the time. We were always in church. I sang in the choir, played hymn bells. I did everything. And my parents were really good to us. My dad and mom did take very good care of us. Daddy, I never doubted for a minute that they loved me, and I had a special bond with my mom and dad because my mother she played the piano and she loved music, especially gospel music. My dad was a lover of music and words and history. He was a history teacher, and I inherited that part of them that the other children didn't get. So I always shared a special connection with mom and daddy because of the words and the music. That always connected us in a way that the other ones I don't think did. But when I was in the hospital, I learned how to be alone. It taught me how to be alone and how to be okay with it. I learned in that solitude to trust my instincts. I learned to read people, and I learned how to navigate the world with quiet resilience. I just became an observer. I watched and I listened, and I would carefully put pieces together of people's emotions and the dynamics around me. And slowly through that, I began to develop a sense of self. I started building walls around me of strength because I had to be strong to be 5 and be in the hospital all by myself. And deep down, I knew I was okay, but it was still, I had to develop that courage that any child might when searching for protection in a world that felt uncertain and scary at times. So through the years, my confidence has always been fragile. It grows and it stops. I mean, I'll have a lot of confidence one day and not so much the next day. And it's kind of like the wind. It flows like a whisper, and other days it's just a gale. You never know how I'm going to be from one day to the next. But over time, I came to understand my own strength. I came to understand when I doubted myself and why. And for most of my life, I believed I could face anything. And but that belief was tested in so many ways the day my son died. I've experienced loss before, but there was nothing that could have prepared me for losing my child and the depth of grief I would face when I lost him. My first encounter with death came at the age of 5 when my grandfather died. He was the first person I ever saw in the casket, yet it didn't frighten me. I'm raised Southern Baptist. I instinctively understood that what made him wasn't there anymore. He was already somewhere else, and in our religion, he was in heaven, and I didn't worry about him. And so it brought me kind of a peace and a comfort knowing that I kind of knew where he was and he was safe and okay. So as I grew older, people passed away. I know there was a young man, Sonny, who was killed when I was in, I think, 7th grade or something like that. And then losses started coming more frequently. I think every year we had someone die. In high school and then in college, my daddy passed away, and then a friend of mine passed away. So death wasn't foreign to me. It had woven itself into the fabric of my life. It was just part of it. In fact, I remember a member of our church had a funeral home, and I spent a lot of time there. One of my friends was dating one of the guys who worked there. And so my curiosity about death grew even stronger there. And it was not out of fear, but from a deep desire to understand death and things that no one could fully explain. That's what I wanted to know. And that curiosity that I've talked about before in my first introduction, it helped shape my ambitions. For a long time, I wanted to be a forensic pathologist, and that didn't work out. I ended up getting a degree in criminal justice, and which also death is a part of criminal justice. I was a probation parole officer for many years. And I was a guardian ad litem for the state of North Carolina. So even in that field, death was a part of my work. So something I learned to approach with acceptance. I learned even to have a strange sense of comfort in some ways about death. It just didn't scare me. But the day that my child died, death just took on a whole new meaning. It became something I couldn't understand or accept. It became my enemy, a relentless force I despised with every part of my being, and I mean I did. It overwhelmed me with anger and confusion. It tore apart the foundation of my existence. Suddenly, nothing felt certain, not my belief, my spirituality, not even my identity. Nothing felt certain. I found myself lost in a world where my child didn't exist anymore, and I was grasping for answers and for comfort, just for anything to hold on to. But death didn't just take my child, it took a huge piece of me as well. It took a part of my soul. It felt like I was shattered. My heart was broken. I became a shadow of the person I once was, and I started stumbling through life with an unbearable emptiness. It just felt so empty and so lonely, and I was so lost. It was a suffocating weight that pressed down on me every single day, and a despair that just followed me around. So a little bit about my son. Matthew was, his name is Matthew Scott Rayleigh. He was just 24 when he was tragically killed in a motorcycle accident. He was on his way to the beach to attend Biker Week in Myrtle Beach, but also to see me. I had just moved into a rental house in Oak Island, North Carolina. He was going to move in with me after having spent 5 years as a military police officer in the Army. He had just gotten out, and he was on his way down to see me and see the house I rented and figure out what he needed to bring with him to move in. I remember when I was pregnant with him, I was very nervous. I was afraid I'd be a terrible mother. I had babysat all through life, but I typically didn't hang around really babies a lot. Younger kids, sure, but not really babies. So I was terrified I was going to be a horrible mother because I wasn't sure what to do. I think every mother experiences that. But the minute that I felt my son move inside me, I was in love. I became his protector. I was a lioness. There was nothing I wouldn't do for my child. And 16 months after I had Matthew, my daughter Megan was born. I felt the same way about her. And even to this day, I still feel that same feeling that I would do anything to protect my children. I became fierce in my protection of my kids. And, my kids were growing up, I was known as Supermom because I did so much for them. I became a huge part of their everyday life and their friends and their school life. I wanted to be every part of it and raise my children. It was so exciting to do that. Well, Matthew grew into an extraordinary young man. He did. He had just returned home, was full of plans, and new chapters were opening up for him. And he just had so much that he wanted to live for and so many things he wanted to do. So I had just laid my mom to rest January 3rd, 2017, just left my home of 17 years, got divorced, and moved to the beach. And the beach that I moved to held happy memories for our family. The kids had grown up there. Our family had been there. Lots of friends had been there. So we all kind of vacationed at the same place. And I loved being there because I knew that my son was going to live with me, and then it was just a couple hours away from my daughter and her children, and she would be down a lot. But then came that phone call that no parent wants to ever get, and I can't believe I was one of the parent that got that phone call, that my son had been in an accident. He was on life support and not expected to live, and that he was in a trauma center in South Carolina. So the days and nights after that followed were just a haze in my memory. I was in shock. I was full of anguish. But Matthew, what happened to be an organ donor, when he was filling out his paperwork to go into the Army, I was the one filling it out with him, as in, if you were killed in action, what would you want to happen to you? And he insisted, Mom, what are you doing? And I said, I'm an organ donor. So he said, well, I'm going to be an organ donor too. And I explained what an organ donor does and he gladly signed up to be one. And oh, I'm so thankful that he was, because with him being an organ donor, even though he was declared dead the next day after I got to the trauma center, it was Memorial Day weekend. They had to make preparations to find the recipients for his organs, and it took a couple of days. So I had from Friday night until Monday evening to be with him and to sit with him and to feel the warmth of his skin, and to hold his hand and to be there for him, and to try to figure out how I'm going to walk out of that room without my son. So it was just an unbearable time. And because, as much as I stayed with him, I tried to hold on to every single moment that I could, knowing that those would be my last moments with him. So when the time came to say goodbye, it was the most gut-wrenching, terrifying moment of my life. My baby was gone. The next time I saw him, I knew he'd be in a casket, and just the finality of losing my child was so unbearable, and that weight, it still crushes me every single day. There's not a day goes by it doesn't crush me. I couldn't imagine ever feeling anything other than pain again after that day. It consumed every part of me. I felt like I was sucked into an inferno of grief, living through hell on earth. Life suddenly was just horrendous for me, and all I wanted to do was be with my son. I was his mother, and he needed me. And I needed to know where he was, what he was feeling, who he was with, what he was doing, just like I'd always done. But then, death is the one thing, it doesn't allow us that luxury. It's the one part of life we can't participate in, when someone we love leaves us. And when we leave, we come into life alone and we leave it alone. It's just the way things are. It's the harsh reality of life. And another reality of life is that death is inevitable for everyone. It's a simple concept, but it's just so truly hard to comprehend sometimes, and emotionally, mentally, and physical. And I know that Queen Elizabeth once said, grief is the price you pay for love. And I've never forgotten that. We as humans can't help it when we fall in love. We fall in love with everything. We fall in love with people. We fall in love with animals. We fall in love with places and songs and times and moments and just whatever. We love so many things. And in life, we grieve everything that we lose. But death, especially the death of a child, it's the most unnatural, impossible thing that could ever happen to a parent. And I never thought I would be that parent. But here I am, almost 8 years later, still in pain, still in disbelief, and still carrying the weight of that loss as though it happened yesterday. And honestly, it never gets easier and it never gets better. I've just come to realize that the same fighting spirit I had as a child, as just Lisa in that hospital when I was 5 years old, the girl who faced the world on her own terms, is still within me now. I'm slowly learning to navigate this new normal. I'm piecing together a life that's forever changed. I'm finding ways to cope with the loss of my son, my parents who both died, my best friend just died 2 years ago, and all the people who once filled my days that just are not here for me in my grief. They're just not a part of my life anymore. And the pain honestly doesn't fade. It doesn't, but at least I'm discovering new ways to carry it, one day at a time and one step at a time. And as a mother, I feel it's my responsibility to show my daughter and grandchildren that life does go on, and even in the shadow of grief, that we're still here, still living, and each day holds both the weight of our sorrow and the weight of our pain and our love. And every moment we're here, I carry the weight of missing my baby in my heart, but I find comfort in knowing and feeling that one day I'll be reunited with him. It's just what I believe. And it doesn't matter what you believe or what anybody else believes. It's my truth and my belief that I'll see him again. But until then, I think I owe it to myself. I think I owe it to my daughter and my grandchildren and the people in my life to be present and to make the most of the time that I have while I am still here. I miss Matthew more than words can ever express, but I know that he, along with my mom and my dad and my friend Michael and everybody I've lost, they would want us to keep living and thriving. They would. We honor them by living fully in our lives and loving fiercely and showing up in the world with open hearts and gratitude for each special moment. So on this channel, We'll be diving deep into the many causes of grief and explore the dizzy and overwhelming ways it affects us, both in our minds and our bodies. We'll touch on difficult subjects, often overlooked topics, and search for a common thread that can guide us toward a healing we can learn to live with. I hope you'll join me on this bittersweet, transformative journey that grief has forced upon us all. I'm here for you, and I'm hoping to build a community rooted in love, loss, and respect, where healing leads us to meaningful change. Welcome to my story. I hope in hearing it, you might find a little inspiration for your own journey. Join me each week for another episode of my diaries, Journals from the Edge. Thank you, and we'll see you again soon.